strong.
Chapter 1. Here's a Teenager. Shungzhou Calendar in Autumn 9999, East China Sea, Qingzhou City. Qingzhou Academy, Qingzhou City Holy Land, Qingzhou City rich nobles, and more than half of the powerful men in the Zongmen family all came from Qingzhou Academy. Therefore, everyone in Qingzhou City is proud to be able to enter the palace, and once they have the opportunity to enter the palace, they must study hard. However, not everyone seems to have this awareness. At this time in a school at Qingzhou Academy, a teenager was lying on a desk and sleeping soundly. Above the lecture hall, a young girl in a long Xingyi shirt noticed this scene, and a hint of anger appeared on Qiao's face, and she walked towards the sleeping teenager. Qi Qinyi, 17 years old, is an official student of Qingzhou University, an external student lecturer, beautiful face and hot body. In Zuzush, Qinyi's eyes move with Qinyi's moving posture. Even if he is angry, Qinyi's steps are still elegant. This fellow is actually sleeping in Sister Can's lecture hall again. It seemed that he had noticed the sleeping posture, and many of the young people around were slightly speechless. Obviously, this isn't the first time. Sister Can's appearance and figure, even looking at her is enough to please the eye. What's on that man's mind? Among the many lecturers, Qinyi was definitely the most popular lecturer. There's no one. As for the reason, as long as you look at it, I don't know how many people worship her as a goddess. The lecture hall is always full of school buildings. So far I sleep in Qinyi's lecture hall. This is blasphemy against the goddess. Qi Qinyi's steps were very light. When he came to the boy's side, there was no sound. She stood at the table, staring at the sleeping face in front of her, her beauty covered with ice. Yi Futian. A soft voice came out, but not from Qinyi's mouth, but from behind Yi Futian. It seems that I heard someone crying in my sleep. Yi Futian's body moved, his head was held up with his hands, his eyes opened casually, and his dim eyes reflected the surging peaks and peaks. It's huge. Yi Futian couldn't help but whisper. His voice was very light, as if talking to himself, but in the quiet environment at this time, his voice still seemed unusually sudden. Just for a moment, many eyes freezing in the air, it turned into anger. How dare he be openly reckless, Sister Qin? This shameless man, asshole. The angry expression turned into a sharp sword, leaving Yi Futian cold, as if he felt that he was not right. His eyes moved to an interesting place, and then I saw a face that was soft and filled with jade. Forehead. Yi Futian's face was black. Why Qinyi? Wasn't Haruyuki the one who called him? He glanced back and saw a 15-year-old innocent girl glaring at him. Yi Futian glanced at the girl, then cursed, and she was miserable. No wonder the size was wrong. Brother Qin, Yi Futian just wanted to explain. Yi Futian, Qinyi interrupted him nonchalantly, and said, on what background was Qingzhou Zugong founded? Obviously, Qinyi was trying to avoid embarrassment now and change the subject, but Yi Futian could clearly feel his anger at this moment. He even felt a faint sword stream flowing from Qinyi. Pain in every inch of his skin. 300 years ago, Emperor Donghuang unified the Eastern Holy Land, and ordered the princes of the world to establish the Martial Arts Academy, and prosper the martial arts. Qingzhou Academy was founded in this context. Yi Futian responded, of course, what he said was an official record. There was another name in the wild history that he saw in the family, however, the taboo name was never allowed to be mentioned. What profession do you practice? Qinyi asked again. Practice can be divided into martial arts and techniques. There are many professions such as warriors, knights, swordsmen, etc., and there are many professions such as magicians, and refineries, and magicians are divided into many departments. Of course, there are talents. Those who practice martial arts at the same time. Yi Futian responded. You seem to have missed a profession, Qinyi asked with a serious look. Of course you don't miss it. A holy light appeared on the young man's face. The strongest professions recognized by the divine land are heavenly nanny, god of fate, and god-given talents. Those with rare talents, such as summoners, most of the beast masters and astrologers are from destiny masters. No matter they practice martial arts, destiny masters have a talent that is stronger than others. Everyone around me is fascinated, the destiny of the mage, the legendary profession, the destiny of the inheritance, and can be liked by Kang. Not only that, even the most common destiny magicians are also suitable for martial arts. Qin Yimulu looked at the front, then looked at the young man in front of him, and was a little angry. I didn't expect you to know so much about this. Of course. Yi Futian looked at Qinyi and said seriously, I am a destiny mage. Pooh. Not far away, a teenager who was drinking water slammed down, coughing, looking around Yi Futian with a pair of eyes, like an idiot. There are shameless people in this world. It was indeed the legend of Qingzhou Academy. Not only did he openly tease Sister Qin, but now he lied that he was a magician of destiny, in order to attract Sister Can's attention. However, who is he? After 3 years of training in the registration palace, he has awakened in the first state of gathering gas, his body is weak, and it seems that the refining has not been completed. This mediocre person could even be called a quiet person. Mage. Shameless. Qi Qinyi's breasts rippled over and over again, and she was suddenly amazing. He looked at Yi Fuxian angrily. Since you are a destiny mage, of course you have a soul in the palace of life. Let me see the soul of your palace of life. My living soul is still asleep and cannot be summoned. I fell asleep in the lecture hall because of the living soul. Yi Fuxian responded calmly. Yu Fuxian. Qin Yi suddenly shouted. Mei Mei looked at the young man in front of her, and said, 3 years ago, when you were 12 years old, you entered the palace. At that time, I was still a disciple and visited test your aptitude. Your perception of Reiki is heavenly, shocking the palace, and many teachers pay attention. However, for the next 3 years, you made no progress, remained in the first rousing atmosphere of reunion, did nothing all day, lazy, absent-minded in the lecture hall. Have you practiced it? Now, you are deceiving yourself as a destiny wizard, and using an excuse to fall asleep in the lecture hall. In the past 3 years, no matter whether it is the spring festival or the autumn festival exam, you have abstained from voting, and you have ranked first in the learning palace. Yi Fuxian, do you have any shame? With Qin Yi's angry roar, the entire school building became silent, the needles sounded, and everyone's eyes stared at Qin Yi's excited face. It seemed that this was their first time seeing Sister Qin like this. Yi Fuxian also looked calm, and those dark eyes stared at the beautiful face reddened with anger in front of him. It's been 3 years. Yi Fuxian whispered in his heart, did not expect that 3 years had passed unconsciously, and the man in the palace of life did not change at all, and he was a little surprised, and the iceberg of the sexy goddess Qin Shi. Originally he had noticed it, and since he entered the school to detect talent perception gifted has started. The space is dead. Qin Yimai's eyes stare at the young man in front of his eyes, handsome face with clear lines, clean and deep eyes like the stars, 15 years old. In addition to being thinner, can't take any other trouble, 3 or 2 years then it must be a beautiful man. Is my tone too heavy? Qin Yi saw Yi Fuxian's eyes looked a little lonely, couldn't help but secretly said in his heart, the anger also subsided slightly. There is still 1 more month to go to the autumn exams. If you still abstain or fail this time, even if the rest of your life is interceding for you, it will be in vain. Zugong will not let you stay, do you understand? Qin Yi continued. The eyes of the people in the school building remained, and it seemed that Zugong could not stand the man. In the end, will he be expelled from Qingzhou Academy? If so, I am afraid that the book will be written into the history book of Qingzhou Academy. After all, it was extremely rare to be expelled from the Qingzhou Academy. He will go, I will go. In the end, an indifferent voice came. Many people looked at the boy sitting in the corner with complex eyes, envy, worship and fear. The decision has been made in Zugong Palace. The rest of your life does not need to participate in the Spring Festival next year. You can choose any of the Zugong battlegrounds, the knights, and any of the spelling palaces to practice. His future cannot be influenced by you. With Yi Fuxian sighing, his fate and the rest of his life would eventually go in a completely different direction. Involved. Yi Fuxian's mouth curled into a faint smile, a bit cynical. Shut up. Sitting behind him for the rest of his life, his eyes glared at Qin Yi with a bright sharp light. Sit down. Yi Fuxian did not return his head. He said lightly that the rest of his eyes were stagnant. He looked back, and then sat quietly as if Yi Fuxian's words were for him. Do iron orders. I decided. Yi Fuxian's face showed a slightly frivolous smile and looked at Qin Yidao. I officially participated in the autumn exams this year. Behind me, a bright light flashed in the eyes of the rest of my life. After 3 years, will he finally be serious? Qingzhou Zugong practiced for 3 years. Everyone in the palace only knew that he was talented for the rest of his life. He is gifted with a sense of gold attribute and martial arts. He can also practice magic and martial arts. Even though he was an outside disciple, he was better than many people. Lecturer even higher. However, who really knows a sleeping teenager? Your body is weak, and you are still in the state of resurrecting the first reunion. Even if you take the autumn exam, how can you live? Qin Yi looked at Yi Fuxian, sighed in his heart. Even if he is awake now, I am afraid that it is still too late. What if it's over? Yi Fuxian seemed to know nothing, and had a strong confidence in his tone. If you can get through it, you can do whatever you want in the lecture hall later. Qin Yidao. Yi Fuxian's eyes flashed a strange light. Looking at the shadow and hot body in front of him, his eyes subconsciously looked at a place that should not be seen, and the weak said, do you want to do something? This person, what does this mean? Many people looked at Yi Fuxian. Where has this shameless bastard been seen? It seemed that he had noticed Yi Fuxian's eyes. Many people have the desire to run away. He even dared to tease Master Qin. Qi Qinyi naturally noticed Yi Fuxian's eyes. The sympathy that had just appeared disappeared instantly. Mei Mei glared at Yi Fuxian, gritted her teeth and said, whatever you want. Q. 2 months after the end of Ancient God King, a new book was released, and everyone was cheering for it. Chapter 2. 3-Year Gas Collection. Qin Yi looked at Yi Fuxian fiercely, saw the smile on his face, and couldn't help but think about 3 years ago, when he was 12 years old that year. When he faced the aptitude test, he faced many academics, and his clean face hung a smiling smile so natural and proud, so different from the nervousness of other teens. Time perception test results, heaven and earth aura, divine quality, natural martial arts practitioner. Now that 3 years have passed, except for his perceptual talent, his realm hasn't improved in the slightest. He was lazy, and rarely saw him in the lecture hall, but his eyes were the same as 3 years ago. What if you don't do it? Qin Yi asked. Brother Qin wants to do anything. Yi Fuxian said. I hope that you will not affect the future for the rest of my life. Qin Yi looked at the resolute teenager sitting at the back. For the rest of his life, he had the attribute of a golden taste, his awakening to the ever-changing realm, and he was even better than himself with the mystical realm of his 7 awakenings. The future cannot be postponed. Okay, Yi Fuxian nodded, but is this possible? Qin Yi walked back to the podium and looked around at everyone. Then he said, there is still 1 month left before Q Yi. I hope you can hurry up and wait until next spring. A group of outer students will officially enter the school palace. Ling Xiao, you have stepped into the 6-fold awakening warrior realm, Feng Qingshu, and you have also spent a lot of time in the 5-fold resurrection god realm. I hope that you can go further in the spring festival exams next year. The first realm of Shu's practice is awakening, also known as 9 awakening, namely, gathering qi, refining, and kaimai, iron bone, divine power, and unrivaled, mysterious, changeable, and union. If Zun could experience 7 awakenings before turning 18 and stepping into the mysterious world, as long as his performance in the Spring Festival examination wasn't too bad, he could really become a formal disciple of Qingshu Academy. Sister Qin, rest assured. Ling smiled and nodded. Feng Qingshu swung her fist, and got closer to the target. Let's go. Qin Yi whispered softly, then lifted his feet and walked towards Zush. Many young people's eyes followed the graceful figure. Finally, when Qin Yi's back disappeared, one after another was fierce. His eyes turned to Yi Fuxian. This jerk, even the goddess in their hearts was belittled. Yi Fuxian. A cold voice came out, attracting the attention of many people. The voice leader reminded his young girl Feng Qingshu before sitting behind Yi Fuxian. At the age of 15, she had become slender and beautiful, her eyes were very beautiful, her facial features were very beautiful, her body was filled with youth, and she felt pure and beautiful. When he stood up, the jade legs suddenly appeared slender and erect, with elegant curves. How can you do this? Feng Qingshu had a hint of anger in her eyes, looking at Yi Fuxian. Yi Fuxian looked at the girl's inexplicable anger, raised an eyebrow, and then smiled, aren't you jealous? Wu Fengqing and Zumai's eyes stagnate, and he looked at each other silently, and continued, how do you explain it to Uncle Yi? Explain to my father. Yi Fuxian blinked, then remembered that his father said that the Qingshu girl had a good buttocks, and he couldn't help but notice the uneven curves, and his expression became strange. What do you think the whole day? After all, we are still small, we will consider the matter of having a baby later. Yi Fuxian said with a long thought, and when he said this, there was silence at once. Many teens just feel angry. How could this bastard be so shameless? Not long ago, he had blatantly underestimated the goddess Qin Shi, and now he was speaking unbearable words to a 15-year-old pure girl Feng Qingshu. Shameless. Wu Fengqing Zhu froze, and then I remembered that Uncle Yi had once made a very indecent joke to his father, and his mischievous face immediately turned red. Was this shameless bastard deliberately misinterpreting it? I mean, if you were expelled from the academy after this fall, how would you explain it to Uncle Yi? Feng Qingshu's chest was surging. What was this person thinking? Obviously, he doesn't believe that only Yi Fuxian, who is awakened to a great level, can pass the exam next fall. How could it be? Yi Fuxian looked at the girl and shook his head slightly. 3 years, I have stuck to the virtue of awakening, but I still do what I do and speak freely. I also want to ask, Yi Fuxian, said Shy. Do you know how to write it? A cold voice suddenly reminded me. Many people looking back, seeing the teenager sitting behind Feng Qingshu, Ling smiled. Wu Awake woke up in the peerless 6th realm. Ling Xiao, who took the master line in the wind department, was extremely talented at the age of 15 at the outer gate of Qingshu Academy. Next year, he would have the opportunity to officially enter the academy through the Spring Festival examinations. Ling Xiao didn't even look up to see Yi Fuxian when he spoke. His eyes fell on Feng Qingshu and continued, the lowest level exists, but the words are lighter than a dazzling genius girl. Where is the courage and confidence, but a word, stupid, fearless. Ling smiled and said many things that people wanted to say but did not dare to say. They all looked at Yi Fuxian ironically. This person, however shameless, was truly not someone else. I don't know when I will come to Yi Fuxian for the rest of my life. When he stood there, he immediately gave off a strong aura, and the eyes of the unscrupulous satire also converged a lot. The rest of my life, Feng Qingshu shouted softly. The rest of his life nodded casually, but his eyes stared at Ling Xiao, showing a strong pressure. Fool, fearless. Yi Fuxian did not become angry with Ling Xiao's irony. Things like that have gone through a lot in the past 3 years. Some people like to step on others to prove their superiority, especially in front of beautiful women. Noodles, do you think you know much? Yi Fuxian said lightly. As far as practice is concerned, what I know is naturally not comparable to you. Ling Xiao said calmly, extravagant firewood that rarely appears in lecture halls in the first world of awakening, can it be stupid? A warrior, how can I defeat the fire mage and the dual gold system? Yi Fuxian suddenly asked. Ling smiled, and then satirically said, are you showing off your IQ? Mo said fire and gold. A dual attribute mage, even if it is a single mage, as long as it is not an idiot to make the soldiers close, it is almost invincible to fight alone. The mage can use magic methods, it is undoubtedly better than the warrior alone. This is undoubtedly, the victory rate of the warrior is very low. Idiot, if the realm of the warrior is higher, he can be naturally defeated. Yi Fuxian sneered. Ling smiled, his face sank, and everyone around him looked at Yi Fuxian. This is a shameless question. You put forward the fight for various professions, of course it is the premise of the same world as the premise, is it so small and meaningful? Ling Xiao quipped. Are you in the same world, then what if this warrior is a person practicing spiritual practice? Yi Fuxian asked again, and many people in the school were stunned, showing the spirit of thinking, and the strength of physical cultivation was strong. Law, should be able to get close to magic mages for a short time. What you are talking about is a fire and gold attribute mage, wrapped in fire, and combined with the strong defense and attack power of the gold system. Even if you are close, it will not be weaker than physical training. Ling Xiao sneered. If this training is to practice fighting techniques like ninefolds, and with explosive training power, do you think metal defense is useful? Yi Fuxian revealed scorn. As for which attacks, you should understand that they are meaningless. Ling smiled with slightly dignified eyes. Indeed, a spiritual practice practitioner should be able to avoid the positive attacks of surgery. In theory, Yi Fuxian was right. After all, this is only speaking on paper and has no practical meaning. Ling Xiao naturally couldn't admit defeat. Yes, how can a magician lose to a warrior? Someone echoed. Everyone is also a cloud, and I have also learned to make fun of other people's ignorance. Then I will ask the simplest question, evoke a state of reunion first, can different people practice differently? Yi Fuxian asked again. Budaido's practice regards heaven and earth as a way to gather gas. Magicians are more sensitive to single attribute aura, but also more arrogant. Therefore, he collects single attribute aura. Naturally, the two are different. If both are martial arts, then there is no difference. If this is a mage gathering, due to the different attributes, the gathering environment will naturally be different. Ling Xiao slowly spoke, considering many factors. Idiots. Yi Fuxian gave Ling Xiao a disdainful look, then turned to leave. What do you mean? Ling Xiao frowned and looked at Yi Fuxian's back, speechless, pretending to leave with victory. Stupid. This guy can pretend, someone said sarcastically. However, when they were talking, Yi Fuxian, who was facing away from them, suddenly appeared a dazzling light, which was a stream of air, flowing around him, like a blinding curtain of light, and the ironic eyes behind him froze directly there. The appearance is incredibly beautiful. Yi Fuxian is a gathering state, he tells everyone in fact that his meeting circumstances are different. Ling's eyes were slightly gloomy, airy, and beaming. Is this really the first condition of awakening? The rest of my life followed Yi Fuxian to go. Soon the figure disappeared from the door. After they left, there was a commotion in the school building. This garbage collection is completely different from the others. So what, if you stay at the gas collection point for 3 years, of course, it will be a little different. If we are the same as the waste, we can do the same thing. That's right. I gathered for 3 years. I don't know where it came from, and what qualifications are so arrogant. Dare to say such words to Sister Qin and Feng Qingshu, this vile trash. Ling Xiao, don't pay too much attention, and talk about the soldiers on the paper is even more beautiful. If you meet in person, you can pinch it with one finger. Someone shouted at Ling Xiao, and many people immediately agreed. Ling smiled seriously, then revealed a bright smile. Yes, such a humble existence, why care so much? Qingshu, that man is too arrogant. I know you have a good relationship with him since he was a child, but still keep your distance from him. Feng Qingshu, his friend Murong King suggested. He always looks very much not familiar with Yi Fuxian. His level is very low, he still has a sense of complacency. That person is indeed a bit over the top, Feng Qingshu said slightly indignantly. Qingshu. Murong King didn't really care when she saw Feng Qingshu's tone, and couldn't help but be serious. Can you wake up? You can become a formal disciple at any time. You have to think carefully about the future, but his behavior will affect your reputation, but you don't care about it. What makes other people think about it? Because it's worthy of someone like that. He Fengqing Zuixu fixed her eyes, she didn't think much. It's time to mature, and contact him less in the future, it is best to draw a line with him. Murong King continued to persuade. Chapter 3, 3 Borders a Day. Qingzhou Zugong Palace is a sacred place in Qingzhou City, which covers a very large area, built on a mountain and supported by Tianyao Mountain. In Qingzhou Zugong Palace, even if he is a disciple, he has his own independent institution. Xi Futian returned to the area where the disciples lived. In his own yard, the rest of his life followed him quietly. All my life, I meant to give up. At this point, Yi Futian stopped and whispered. Even if you don't wake up to your destiny, you are still a genius. The rest of life looked at the youth in front of him. Yi Futian said that he was a destiny mage. Everyone thought it was a joke. Only the rest of life knows, which isn't funny. Yi Futian, he is indeed a destiny mage. Of course I understand this, but it's a little unwilling. Yi Futian smiled bitterly. 3 years, if you continue like this, you will be completely discarded. It seems that you have to work hard. Let's go and start practicing. Yi Futian stared back at the boy who was a head taller than him. The rest of his life was greater than that of ordinary people, and he was born with a powerful aura. The two of them walked to the training ground in another courtyard. Yi Futian sat cross-legged and saw that his eyes were closed. Suddenly, a bright stream of air circulated around him. The auras of heaven and earth around him seemed insane, one after another. Yi Futian's body came out, and the rest of his life sat behind him and watched the scene quietly. At this moment, Yi Futian was like a terrible vortex, devouring all the aura. If he was seen by others, he would be shocked to heaven. A terrifying stream of air flowed along Yi Futian's body towards a place in his mind, where his life palace was located. The soul palace has a soul, which is a destiny soul, and can be called a destiny practitioner. At this time, in the palace of Yi Futian's life, there is a towering ancient tree, with lush green leaves and leaves, but it is surrounded by barren fields. When the aura of day and day flows, the ancient tree greedily absorbs all the aura, green twigs and leaves. There was a rustling sound, and the wind was automatic. Under the ancient tree, an illusory figure condensed, which was Yi Futian's figure. He looked at the ancient tree in front of him and whispered, after 3 years of aura, I haven't changed, I only ask for it. From now on, I will not imbue it with aura. After all, Yi Futian's conscious shadow disappeared, and the heaven and earth aura that flowed into the body went to the limbs and bones, and no longer flowed into the life palace. The powerful heaven and earth aura washed the flesh and prepared to repair the body, but at this time, an abnormal change suddenly occurred. A strong suction force came, and the aura flowed back in an instant, and flowed towards the life palace, which was again crazy. This sudden change made Yi Futian's body tremble, and then he had a strong discomfort. In the past 3 years, all the auras have been sent to the Palace of Life, but there is no change. Now, he still had to take it by force to stop him from practicing. Yi Futian's mind wants to fight, however, the overbearing power ignores everything, sucks all the aura crazily, and even the essence of Yi Futian's body is sucked out. Just for a moment, his face turned pale a lot. Bastard! Yi Futian shouted, accompanied by the entry of Reiki into the Palace of Life. He felt his head shaking violently, as if a sudden change occurred in the Palace of Life. Consciousness wanted to enter, but was instantly split by a violent force. Damaged. Ah! A low hissing sound escaped his mouth, and the rest of his life suddenly stood up, staring at the dramatic change in Yi Futian. Not only Yi Futian's body, but also the heaven and earth aura that gathered around him rushing towards Yi Futian. In addition, the surrounding flowers and trees withered at a very fast speed, as if thinking of something. A bright edge flashed in the eyes of the rest of his life. He walked behind Yi Futian and sat down with his hands on his body. For a moment the strong suction devoured the aura on his body. Finally, will you wake up? Ah! When Yi Futian woke up, he only felt very weak. He opened his eyes, and the sunlight was a bit dazzling. It seemed that after one night. What happened? Yi Futian sat down, watched the surrounding trees wither, and sat weakly for the rest of his life to catch his breath. Thinking of what happened yesterday, he closed his eyes and entered the palace of consciousness. Then, his body shook violently. At this time, in the lonely Palace of Life, moonlight drips from the sky, and there is a vast land, like there are mountains and rivers, and the ancient trees of life and soul stand on the ground, fluttering in the wind, with lush leaves, becoming greener, as if full of aura. World Tree. Under the ancient tree, Yi Futian's consciousness appeared. Wasn't his father lying to himself? Father once said to himself that his ancestor had the destiny of a magician who practiced against the heavens, the world tree of the soul and soul, which can capture the spirit of all things, but the family inheritance was cut off, and he was the only one who inherited it. Talented ancestor. So isn't the idea of great self-awareness also true? Yi Futian remembered the great idea of self-awareness that had flowed backwards from his urination. He fidgeted, then closed his eyes. He spat out an obscure tactic in his mouth. Mind accessible, mind free to go between heaven and earth. Immediately, in Yu Futian's vision, a rich aura of heaven and earth appeared, and he could even see auras of different colors, which were the purest auras with different attributes, and each color represented a kind of attribute. Fire. Yu Futian's mind locked the fire color aura, which was the fire attribute of heaven and earth aura. The trees and souls of the world turned into the color of fire, dazzling. Suddenly, the aura of the outer fire rushed into Yu Futian's body and walked around. In the internal organs, the burning sensation is very strong. Wood attribute. Yu Futian moved to see his thoughts freely and turned to the green aura. Immediately, the wood aura poured into his body, and the lost spirit and energy in his body quickly recovered. Gold, earth, wind, water. Yu Futian kept trying. For a long time, he finally stopped, opened his eyes again, and looked stupid in front of him. This, really? Yu Futian looked at his hands, some in disbelief. Of course it is, you, master of all attributes. Behind, the rest of his life clenched his fists, his body was exposed with excitement and his muscles opened, his eyes stared at Yu Futian. Also, he can martial arts and practice all the attributes of Fate Mage. In that case, isn't my talent? Yu Futian's eyes lit up. Reverse the sky. The rest of his life said, there is no second person in Qingzhou City. A bright smile bloomed at the corner of the lips. So many ancestors did not inherit the talents of their ancestors, but fell on themselves. Is this destiny? Mage's fate. Go. Yu Futian suddenly stood up and went outside the courtyard. Where? Asked the rest of his life. Haoshan. Yu Futian responded to Haoshan, referring to Tianyao Mountain leaning against Qingzhou Academy. Haoshan, monsters are rampant, what to do there? Asked the rest of his life. It's in the suburbs, there's something you're afraid of. Yu Futian was out when he spoke, and he didn't say much for the rest of his life, following closely behind. Tianyao Mountain was a continuous mountain range, with rough terrain and monsters running across the mountain. Few people know how deep it is. It is said that Qingzhou Zugong was built against the mountain to prevent the monsters of Tianyao Mountain from coming out. At the same time, it is also a place for students to study. At noon, the two teenagers climbed to the top of the mountain on the edge of Tianyao Mountain, stood on a boulder, and looked down at the towering Zoo Palace, and Yu Futian spit out a stuffy air. For 3 years, knowing that he is a destiny mage, he is only willing to practice martial arts, but his soul has not changed, and his pride has always hidden a layer of loneliness. Now, it's finally over, and he's about to move towards his dream. Become a powerful destiny practitioner. The scorching sun fell on Yu Futian's body, and the young man stared at the sunlight, his narrowed eyes showing a strong sense of confidence. The view of the big idea, the essence of which lies in observation and imagination. Right now, he wanted to think about the sun. Yu Futian thought about the sun burning on the rock at the top of the mountain. Immediately, the sunlight turned into solar fire, penetrated Yu Futian's body, and then he penetrated into Yu Futian's body. 5 internal organs, up to 6 feet, fill the entire body with limbs and bones. Looking forward for the rest of his life, Yu Futian turned into a fiery man, and his stern eyes showed a smile. The sleeping true dragon will finally wake up. A crackling sound came out. Yu Futian's skin was blazing red by the fire, and under the calcification of the sun's fire, his body was constantly changing. For a long time, Yu Futian's complexion became extremely clear, as if there was fire. Within his body, a series of fire dragons appeared, hitting the meridians everywhere, making a thunderous buzzing sound. Fortunately, no one was at the top of the mountain. Only the rest of my life can hear this rough voice. Xiu Lian Kai's pulse movement was so terrifying. Unknowingly, it was almost dusk, the sun was setting to the west, Yu Futian's body had been shrouded in flames, and there seemed to be a rainstorm on his body. The bones continued to beat, until the sun disappeared. Yu Futian stopped, his eyes slowly opened. There was a light flashing from the pupil. 3 realms in one day. The rest of his life shook his mouth, suppressed for 3 years, and erupted once, using the power of the sun to calcine the flesh, destroy the body and open the veins, and step into the 4th realm of enlightenment, iron bone, copper iron skin. It's too domineering, Yu Futian muttered. It would take at least a few months for ordinary people to forge copper skin and iron bones. He became a magician of destiny, and saw the forging of the fire of the sun with great freedom, with the help of life and soul. Forging metal frame for a long time. At this time, he only felt full of strength. Stood up, Yu Futian walked to a huge ancient tree on the mountain peak, his fist whistled, and a fist banged on the trunk of the big tree. His body was crushed, the huge tree in front of him was torn apart, then collapsed, and the place where the fist fell was black. Other people's realm of divine power is absolutely not your enemy. The rest of my life sighed and awakened the 5th realm of real power, with extraordinary strength, but Yu Futian's fist clearly surpassed ordinary martial arts. Royal power. Chapter 4, Life of the Sun. Yu Futian looked at his powerful punch, and was slightly blown away. Then he seemed to remember something. His eyes closed and his consciousness entered the palace of life. The ghost of consciousness appeared under the ancient trees of the world, its eyes full of shock. At this time, the green ancient trees faintly had a layer of fire luster, as if filled with the aura of the nature of fire. But what really surprised Yi Futian was that above the sky, a hot sun circle appeared, emitting a fiery glow, although away from true sunlight. Very dazzling, but still shocking. He was confused with his thoughts freely. He saw mountains, and water. He imagined the practice of the burning sun, and now the sun appeared in the palace of life. This technique is very powerful to capture the heavens and the earth. Yi Futian sighed in his heart. He began to think about the sun in the palace of life. Suddenly, he felt himself turning into a scorching sun. Among them, enter the world's ancient trees. The ancient trees of the dying palace were turned into fire, and the sun hanging from the ancient trees was even brighter. Hot. Yi Futian felt that he was in the sun furnace, and the meridians in his body were constantly undergoing the hardening of the sun fire. There is a soul in the palace of life, it is the soul of life. Yi Futian muttered, thinking about the possibilities, and for a moment, a halo of sunlight appeared behind his head, illuminating the surroundings. His handsome face was actually a sacred little sheen. The soul is the sun. Next life ask. Su Yi opened his eyes suddenly, the sun of the halo disappeared. He looked a bit strange for the rest of his life, and whispered, it seems that I can make a life. He found that the sun in the palace of life is definitely the soul of life, which can not only be used to practice, but also manifest. Yu Yusheng's eyes widened, looking at Yi Futian. Seriously, can you help me make it too? Yi Futian's face was black. This man is thinking too fast, shouldn't he be confused and shocked? He was asked to help make. The brain hole is huge. Yi Futian nodded seriously, then turned around and left. Zhu Yusheng scratched his head and looked at Yi Futian. Where? Practice. Watch the birds and beasts. Yi Futian said in a loud voice. He is thinking about the sun, igniting the solar fire, and continuing to break through the realm. However, from the iron bone to the realm of divine power, he needed to rely on body coordination and the use of force. Now, as long as you can do whatever you want, you can unite your energy, passion, and you can explode with incredible punches and kicks. Is everywhere, even only the outermost. It didn't take long for Yi to enter Qianyao Mountain, and Yi Futian and the rest of his life saw a level 4 monster beast and a leopard in front of him. For the rest of your life, you stop, don't let it leave me. Yi Futian shouted, and his body ran out. The moment his voice fell, the rest of his life drifted away, the earth shook, the monster leopard looked like sensing the threat, he turned and ran like lightning. Want to live and move as you please, the path is natural, unrestricted by action, and unrestricted by heaven and earth. Yi Futian let out a free-thinking method, while he fled thinking about the demon leopard in his mind. The image of running, like every movement of a monster leopard, slowing down repeatedly in his mind, was very clear. Then, his body began to simulate the action of the demon wind tiger. While running through the air, his right leg slightly bent. At the moment of landing, all the power seemed to gather in the right leg, and appeared like a lightning bolt, but at first, his movement seemed a bit less smooth and natural, and he was quickly thrown away by the demon wind tiger. Congratulations, the rest of his life has already walked forward to intercept the tiger. Demon wind and prevented the demon wind tiger from escaping. Not only power, but also wind. Yi Futian can feel the power of the wind around the body of the demon wind tiger. The wind around his body seemed to follow, and the rustling sound continued, and his movements became smoother and smoother. After half an hour, he actually ran with the wind like a monster leopard. For the rest of my life, it's fine. Yi Futian stopped, only to let go of the leopard monster for the rest of his life. You have too much ability to imitate. The rest of his life said, he always paid attention to Yi Futian's figure, and for half an hour, he ran like a monster leopard. I can feel the spiritual power of the wind. I can imitate the speed of the demon wind tiger as long as I master the power transmission skill, but this is not enough. I have to work hard for you today. Yi Futian laughed, and said nothing for the rest of his life. Followed by silence behind him. The next few days, Yi Futian has been training in Qianyao Mountain, observing the monkey body, lion, and tiger strength, and even chasing the flying birds. It's getting better every day. On the 10th day of entering Qianyao Mountain, he also entered awakening the 5th divine realm. On this day, Yi Futian and the rest of his life walked deep in the dense forest. The ground shook slightly, the surrounding trees trembled slightly, and occasionally a roaring roar came. The two looked at each other and walked towards the source of the sound, and the sense of vibration became stronger and stronger. Finally, they saw a beast, huge in size and 5 meters tall. Tier 9th monster ape. For the rest of his life, the monster could threaten him. What surprised him even more was that in front of this ruthless monster ape, there was a girl with a slender body. The girl in white was dressed as white as snow, her long hair danced in the wind, and her clothes fluttered. Her face is perfect enough to be perfect. Even though he was young, he had a red face. This is it, the interpretation of flowers. Yi Futian saw the beauty in Zhang Yan's heart and admired her beauty. Could he not know this legendary girl in Qingzhou Academy? Are you going to help? Yu Sheng asked. Wait, that vicious ape is injured. Yi Fuxian said, there are many injuries to the demon ape, but the girl is safe and sound. Roar. A roar came out, and the vicious ape stepped towards Hua Jiu. The huge body seemed to be able to pinch the girl with ease. I saw that Hua Jiu was as light as a swallow and flew straight into the tree. The ruthless ape actually knocked down a large tree directly, then uprooted it, and swept Hua Jiu into the air. Its power is almost terrifying. The young girl flickered in the air, and a leaf danced with the wind, rolling like a vortex towards the vicious ape, each leaf extremely sharp with the sound of the wind whistling. The violent ape swept over the big tree and swept wildly, and the leaves flew wildly, and the big tree continued to crack, as if it could break into countless knots at any moment. Sand and gravel flew on the ground, countless debris flew, and Waji's figure fell on another tree. When he saw his eyes closed, flying debris rushed towards the vicious ape. A piece of gravel was like a sharp weapon, although it couldn't completely break the ruthless ape's defense, it still left blood on its tough skin. What was even more terrifying was that the pebbles in the void turned into sharp spears under the aura of the aura, pointing at the violent ape that had gone mad. Spell. Yi Fuxian was shocked in his heart. The next moment, he saw the sharp spear cut through the void and pierce into the cruel ape's eyes. A painful roar came out, and the cruel ape turned and fled. A large tree was knocked down directly. The young girl did not chase, the white figure fell to the ground, like a fairy. Have you seen enough? Hua Jiu said lightly. Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life came out, and looked at the girl of the same age in amazement. Good, you are a multi-attribute mage. Yi Fuxian asked. I know you. Hua Jiu didn't answer, but looked at Yi Fuxian. Am I very famous? Yi Fuxian laughed. It might be an honor to be known by the legendary beauty Qingzhou Zugong. 3 years ago, Qingzhou Zugong introductory test, I heard what you said when we first met. Keke. Yi Fuxian showed a bit of embarrassment, but immediately returned to normal, and said, did I say something? Xi Yjiu looked at Yi Fuxian, and then smiled, letting Yi Fuxian look a little stupid. Like a fairy. Hua Jiu said with a smile, then slowly turned around and walked towards the dense forest. Like. Yi Fuxian froze for a moment, then nodded seriously looking back. You're right. The rest of his life watched Hua Jiu disappear. Yi Fuxian recalled that scene 3 years ago. When he saw the 12-year-old Hua Jiu, he said for the rest of his life, this loli has grown so vicious at the age of 12, and it will definitely become a fairy in a few years. I heard that he has awakened the ninth world, martial arts, but the attack spell has just left the body. It is difficult to awaken the ninth world, and there are rumors that he may be a destiny practitioner and has been seen by the great scholars. In the middle, they will be accepted as disciples. The pursuers are like clouds, but no one can see directly on their appearance and talent. The rest of his life whispered softly. Heart touched. Yi Fuxian saw the rest of his life. Yu Sheng looked at Yi Fuxian and shook his head, then seriously said, I think you can be your daughter-in-law. Forehead. Yi Fuxian raised his hand and patted his head for the rest of his life. What do you think? He said. He also turned around, walked forward, with a bright smile on the corner of his mouth, said, but it makes sense, candidate. The rest of my life behind me hearing this sentence with footsteps, staring at the man in front, still a candidate. Shameless. Chapter 5, Feng Qingshu's decision. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 days passed, and the two figures in Haoshan retreated and returned to Qingzhou Academy. There is no small change in Yi Fuxian, his eyes have become more energetic, and his body is better. Walking on Zugong's blue stone path, he had a dream-like feeling, like being away for a long time. This fellow has been hiding for so long and has finally returned. There are still 8 days left for the fall exams. I might not be able to hide it if I wanted to hide. Many people in Zhu Palace whispered when they saw Yi Fuxian. What happened in Qin Yi's lecture hall more than 20 days ago has spread. The legendary, who didn't break the scene for 3 years, turned out to be the frivolous goddess Qin Shi. It's also fun playing with wind and snow. Yi Fuxian's 3 words are now very loud in Qingzhou Zugong. Someone seems to trouble me. Yi Fuxian's hearing was more acute at this time, even in a low voice. What do you think? The rest of his life glanced at him sympathetically. Both Qin Yi and Feng Qingshu had first-class appearances. They are very popular in Qingzhou Zugong, and there are many suitors, especially Qin Yi. After all, he is already a 17-year-old youth. Hot body, this person is reckless 2 beauties a day, how few people want to find him to settle the account. It's okay, you were there anyway. Yi Fuxian shrugged. You can solve it yourself now. Feeling sad for the rest of his life, Yi Fuxian is now at the peak of his divine power, and his combat strength may be even more arrogant than waking up to the incomparable 6th world. Be humble. Yi Fuxian brought his hand swaying forward. The rest of his life saw a shadowy figure in front of him. He used to wake the first world and shout that he is a destiny wizard. Now he really is a magician of destiny, but should he be low self-esteem? Could it be more shameless? As soon as the two returned to the other courtyard, it turned out that someone was walking towards the other courtyard they were in, and more than one group of people. The two groups of people seemed to be coincidental. When they met, they glanced at each other. Their eyes were sharp, they collided in the air, and then they went to another courtyard. These are the people from the Knights of the Budo Palace and the people from the Magic Palace. Many people came to this side, exposing strangeness. Those who came were all disciples of Qingzhou Zhu Palace, from the Knights and Magic Palace. It's not that simple to be jealous. Qingzhou Zugong Budo Palace has battle towers, sword pavilions and knights. There are 7 main palaces in the Magic Palace. One of them is wearing silver and shining clothes, comes from the knights in the name of strong knight training. The other person wore a gold shirt, which was exactly the same as silver. This is a mage from the Golden Palace, a magic palace. Brother Mo Lanshan, Samsung Glory Knight, Brother Han Yi, 2-star Glory Master from the Gold Department, they came at the same time. Some people recognized the two people's heads, and their hearts were slightly stunned, and then they understood why the two of them came. Hey, really big face. Xiu Budo Palace and Shufa Palace came at the same time. Naturally they didn't come to Yi Futian. In another courtyard, Yi Futian stood on the side, watching the rest of his life standing in front of the two sides, with a faint smile on his face. The man who always stood behind her glory, however, could not be covered up. Yes, and in the future, it will be even more dazzling. For this point, he is very sure, just as the rest of his life believes in him. In the previous lecture hall, Sister Qingyi said that the rest of her life can choose the martial arts palace and magical palace arbitrarily without participating in the spring festival next year. At that time, she wondered if the people above would take initiative to ask, and now it's really coming. You go out first. Mo Lanshan said lightly. Yi Futian naturally understood this sentence to say to him, smiled slightly, and didn't care, so he walked out of another courtyard. Many people are gathered outside the Tongbei courtyard at this time. There are thousands of disciples outside the Qingzhou Academy, and the number of disciples that the academy can actively recruit every year does not exceed the number of hands. There is no shortage of jealousy. The rest of my life will be Zugong's official disciple, but he will be expelled from Zugong. It is a joke. Everyone saw Yi Futian alone, and did not hide his voice. Now the people in Zugong are very displeased with him. More. It's only been 3 years since he's been sheltered for the rest of his life. Otherwise, he might not be able to stay in school anymore. I'm a little looking forward to this time, what kind of appearance he will have in this fall exam, someone said with a smile. Instead of worrying about me here, think about yourself, how to deal with the next autumn exam. If the performance is too bad, I am afraid that it will lose face. Yi Futian leaned against the wall and said casually. That's arrogant. Right, the rumors are true. Many eyes stared at Yi Futian, seeing that the rest of his life who would follow him would be Zugong's official disciple. He has no shame. Yi Futian closed his eyes and was too lazy to listen to the voices. It didn't take long for someone to walk out of the courtyard. The people from the knights led by Mo Lanshan walked beside Yi Futian. Then, Mo Lanshan, his footsteps stopped. I heard that the father of the rest of your life is a servant in your family. Mo Lanshan asked lightly, without looking back. He didn't know where to look. Yes. Yi Futian nodded. Worldly life will definitely limit people's horizons, but fortunately, as they age, they will naturally understand more and more. After all, they are not worldly people. How proud you are now, how low you will be in the future. Those who have been with you there are crossroads, and in the future, you won't even have the right to look up. Mo Lanshan said coldly, and when the voice fell, he took a step forward, his figure slowly disappearing. From beginning to end, he did not look at Yi Futian directly, as if refusing. Yi Futian looked a little confused at the figure leaving. He believed that the rest of his life would not be easily decided without asking his opinion. Why was Mo Lanshan mocking himself since he knew the relationship between him and the rest of his life? It seems he and she have never met, right? The people in Zunshu Palace also came out, and Han Yi saw the figure that disappeared in front of him. Then his eyes fell on Yi Futian, and he smiled and said, even sister dares to make fun of you, you have courage. Yi Futian was speechless, but this matter has already been passed on to the official disciple in Zugong. Mo Lanshan is a member of the Knights of Budo Palace. Although Qin Yi trains in the Sword Pavilion, he is also considered to be training in Budo Palace. Han Yi left after a word. Yi Futian's eyes flashed. His heart was like a mirror. There he is. Yi Futian returned to another page. His whole life saw him coming and wanted to talk. Don't think about it, so I want you to make a choice. I apologize for your talent. Don't choose. If there is no follow-up, then they will understand what kind of genius you are. He said casually. For the rest of his life, he saw Yi Futian not caring at all. It seems that he already has his own thoughts in his heart, and can't help but nod. She trusted him more than she believed in herself. There are 7 days before the autumn exams. In the morning, the bell rings at Qingzhou Academy. A group of figures walked out of the courtyard and gathered in the same direction. At this time of year, King Zhu Zugong would gather outside the students to announce something about Qiu Yi, and also a review before Qiu Yi's arrival. The King Zhu Zugong outside the gate of the martial arts field is very large, it can easily accommodate tens of thousands of people. Even if the disciples outside Zugong come one after another, it still looks empty. The outside lecturers had arrived ahead of schedule. Qin Yi was wearing tight clothes today, and he had displayed his hot figure to the fullest. I don't know how many people are attracting attention. That person is here. At this time, there was a small commotion in the crowd, and many people looked in the same direction, where two figures came. I heard that yesterday, the brothers from Budo Palace and Shufa Palace went to recruit the rest of their lives. Few people can afford such treatment. What qualifications does that person have ahead of the rest of his life? Many people look at the legendary, very unhappy. The future of the rest of his life will definitely be a big man, but what about Yi Futian? Fear is the most humble of creatures. However, Yi Futian didn't seem to be conscious at all. How could anyone else understand his relationship to the rest of his life? Sister Qin. Yi Futian walked directly to Qin Yi, his eyes sparkling. No wonder a noble knight like Mo Lanshan would insult such a little person. When Qin Yi saw Yi Futian's face sink, he said, "Where have you been today?" Natural practice has disappeared. Yi Futian said, since he agrees with Master Qin, of course, he must work hard to pass the autumn exam. Jian Qin Yi saw that Yi Futian didn't like to lie, and his face loosened a little. If it could really motivate him to practice, as long as the fall exams weren't too bad, maybe he could ask her to give him some time. Have you stepped into the refining environment? Qin Yi asked. Brother, I have stepped into the realm of divine power. Yi Futian nodded seriously. However, when he heard her words, Qin Yi's face suddenly turned cold. Staring fiercely, he began to want to plead with him, and even believed his words. Pooh! Someone laughed next to him. Ling Xiao didn't know when he wasn't far away and looked at Yi Futian. Sister Qin Yi, why don't you care about such a person? Yi Futian, there really is no time. If you still want to stay in the school, then you will work hard to enter the refining environment for the next 7 days. Qin Yi was a little disappointed. It's a shame to think about the aptitude test 3 years ago. Yi Futian seemed to be able to sense Qin Yi's mood, but a bright smile appeared on his face. At least sister wished him a lot. Relax, brother, I won't let you down. Yi Futian's mouth evoked a proud arch, and the morning sun fell on the handsome face that was still a bit gentle. Qin Yi's heart was slightly warm, but she heard Yi Futian say, sister promised me the conditions, but don't forget it. You really? Qin Yi stomped furiously, turned and walked away. After all, she was only a 17-year-old girl. Many people looked a little stupid, and then looked at Yi Futian even more angry. There was still a hint of jealousy in his eyes. Perhaps jealous that Yi Futian can joke with Qin Yishi's sister so immorally, despite being shameless. Why waste time on such people? A male lecturer whispered to Qin Yi. Qin Yi glanced at him and said, actually, he is very talented, and I don't understand why he hasn't ruined the atmosphere for 3 years. Maybe, this autumn exam, is it really a miracle? I don't understand why you're still fantasizing about him. The lecturer next to him shook his head and looked at Yi Futian's eyes very uncomfortably. Yi Futian was also a little depressed at this time, and said all his life, why doesn't anyone believe the truth? I glanced at him secretly for the rest of my life, more than 20 days, from gathering energy to divine power, who can believe? You and I will officially enter the palace next spring, should you help the Qingshu girl together? Yi Futian asked. For the rest of my life, I glanced at Feng Qingshu and then nodded. If I can train with Yi Futian, Feng Qingshu will have a chance to awaken to the 7th mysterious realm before the spring festival next year. Yi Futian found the place where Feng Qingshu was, and walked over to it. Many people unknowingly gave way, naturally because the rest of their lives stood behind them. But when approaching Feng Qingshu, there was a figure standing in front of her, Feng Qingshu's friend Murong King. Is there something wrong? Murong asked coldly. I'm looking for Qingshu. Yi Futian laughed. I know, there is something, you can say it here. Murong King said again. Yi Futian looked up, ignored Murong King, and looked at Feng Qingshu. I have something to tell you. You said the same thing over there. Feng Qingshu's eyes slightly dodged, and she didn't seem to dare to look at Yi Futian's eyes. Qingshu, what does this mean? Yi Futian wondered. Don't understand, it means that Qingshu doesn't want to get too close to you, pay attention to the size. Murong said coldly. Yi Futian's pupils shrank slightly, and his eyes suddenly became sharp, as if he was very serious, but Feng Qingshu continued to avoid him without looking at him. Forget it. Yi Futian's brows slightly stretched out and whispered softly. Futian wants you to train with him in the future. The rest of his life, suddenly said, his eyes were just as sharp. Yi Futian's eyes were stagnant and he looked at the rest of his life. He had never been a talkative person, but the rest of his life at this time seemed very angry. Wu Fengqingzhu then looked up and saw the sharp eyes of the rest of her life, screaming timidly, "Brother of the rest of life." Many eyes looked to this side. Yi Futian, invite Feng Qingshu to train together. It is ridiculous that this man is really crazy, but the person who said this is the rest of his life, and no one has dared to intervene for a while. I know Qingshu respects you very much, but let Qingshu train with Yi Futian. Do you think, Yi Futian, is he worthy? Murong King looked at the rest of the way. For the rest of his life, he did not look at him directly, ignored his words directly, and still looked at Feng Qingshu Road. I want to know what you think. He clenched his fists. Feng Qingzhu clenched his fists. His body trembled slightly. He looked at the rest of his life, then looked at Yi Futian, and shook his head seriously. Big brother, we have all grown up, still keep our distance. When I said this word, he took a deep breath, as if he had just made an important decision, and it became a lot easier, but he also knew that he would be missing something. Yi Futian had been waiting for his answer. After seeing Feng Qingshu's decision, she shook her head with a bitter smile, and it actually grew. Chapter 6. There is a dragon. Wu Fengqingshu's answer to the expectations of many, Yi Futian even thought that he wanted to train with Feng Qingshu. Is this a disguised pursuit? Absolutely no self-knowledge. Although many people know that the relationship between the two is good, perhaps because of years of friendship, this does not mean that we can cross borders. Feng Qingshu said that we have grown up, perhaps showing our attitude. Have you been beaten? Many people looked elated, as if they had seen a good show. Moreover, there is no room for me at all. Seeing everyone's expressions, Yi Futian couldn't understand what they were thinking. The true story of the dog blood, shook his head, and turned to leave. You ask like this from such a large audience, there really is no choice for him. Yi Futian whispered softly. Ever since he released Murong King in front of you, he has already expressed his attitude. For your friendship over the years, he said that he wants to keep his distance from you. What is this? No relationship. Lion. Young has always been easily gullible. After all, he's only 15 and knows what. Yi Futian seemed to be unconsciously beaten. Instead, he wanted to explain something to Feng Qingshu. Don't forget the words, the attitude is very decisive. Why not give you a little face? Now that the decision has been made, then this friendship ends here. All his life said firmly, he is better than anyone. Understanding Yi Futian, there is a fiery heart under the cynical mask, especially for the people around him. He wants to give him a chance despite everything Feng Qingshu has just done. But he didn't allow it. He had to keep something for Yi Futian, such as his pride and pride. Of course he understood that Feng Qingshu had missed something just now. He would not forget what his father said to Yi Futian. People can easily see things when they're down, and this needn't be a problem. When one day you shine, the whole world will make way for you. Ah! At this time, there was a loud voice from Yanwuchang, which caught the attention of the crowd. Yi Futian and the rest of his life turned to look over there. I saw several figures coming from the sky in front of Yanwuchang. They turned out to be wings born, flapped in the void, and stopped above the Yanwu field. I am the master of the magic palace, the mage of the wind, condensing the wings with wind-type spells, and flying in the air. Many people show their jealousy. Awakening is to break through the boundaries of human flesh and let the aura and flesh fit perfectly. When you step into the world of glory and become a noble wizard, you can cast various spells as you wish. In mainland China, the status of a mage is higher than that of a martial arts practitioner. Flying in the air in the realm of glory, only wind mages can do it. Mount Tianxiu has cleared an area. In this area, there will be no monsters outside the realm of awakening. The next 7 days will be autumn hunting time before Qiyu. You can go hunting and use this to check one's training results over the past year, while honing your skills to fight and face danger. The wind spell that floated in the air said, sooner or later, you must leave school and have not experienced the iron and blood trials. After all, you can't really grow. Of course, Qiyu hunting's safety still has to come first, so I hope you can follow and take care of each other. Everyone nodded to each other. In the autumn hunt before the autumn festival, Qingzhou Academy will clear the field, which is safer than usual. Even so, there are some brave people who will enter Tianyao Mountain to train on their own. Moreover, Qingzhou Academy will open when the Qiyu trials arrive. Many people in Qingzhou will come to witness the ceremony. Your elders may also come. Then, do your best and don't let them down. The Spellcraft Palace brothers continued that these people naturally knew that the Spring Festival and Autumn Festival every year were the most important events of Qingzhou Zugong, and they were also important events for Qingzhou City. Compared to Springway, Qiusheng is slightly bigger. Springway's main goal is to select formal disciples, and only a few talents are the focus. Okay, let's get ready. The man waved his hand, and then the wings of the group incited behind them. Leaving this side, it seems that they are heading towards Haoshan. Yan Wuchang came alive in an instant, and many people gathered to discuss the autumn hunt. Don't miss this fall hunting opportunity. Yi Futian, what do you think? Qin Yi asked Yi Futian. Brother Qin means. Yi Futian looked at Qin Yi. The fall hunt is an opportunity. You and the rest of your life should be very safe. You can take this opportunity to hone in and see if you can break through. Qin Yidao. Not. Yi Fuxian shook his head. I will not participate in this autumn hunt. After all, I just came down from Haoshan not too long ago, so there's no need to go again. Yi Qin Yaimei looked at him and said, you are young, don't affect your mood and become decadent because of a few punches. I think back to the loneliness when Yi Fuxian was rejected by Feng Qingshu earlier. Qin Yi was worried that he would be hit too hard. Yi Fuxian blinked, knowing that Qin Yi had misunderstood, and glanced at Qin Yi's figure, and whispered, brother, actually, I am not young anymore. Qin Yi looked at Yi Fuxian's eyes, then turned angry and said, you haven't been saved. When Yi Fuxian saw Qin Yi's angry expression, the smile on his face became even brighter and shouted, brother Qin, thank you. Qin Yi stopped, then continued to move forward. Very good, you can think about it. His whole life whispered. Yi Fuxian looked at him doubtfully, what to consider? Isn't that your candidate? The rest of his life looked at Yi Fuxian very seriously. Forehead. Yi Fuxian rubbed his head, which was close to Zhu, and black for Mo. Ah. Qingzhou Zugong came alive, and the mighty team headed for Haoshan. Many people are passionate. Such scenes appear every year. A few days later, many of these powerful figures will be decadent, and there will be many your hearts will be overshadowed, and of course you will be hurt. During the siege hunt, Qingzhou Zugong will clear the field, but there are still powerful monsters of the 7th, 8th, and even 90 grades. These monsters will be a nightmare for some people. The hunt is both a trial and a baptism. At the foot of Tianyao Mountain, people kept coming to step into Tianyao Mountain. At this time, a group of people came to the foot of the mountain. Feng Qingshu. Many people paid attention to the young girl in the group. She was wearing a fiery red dress, and her face was beautiful and charming under it, adding a bit of charm. Who is the person beside him? One noticed that beside Feng Qingshu, apart from her friend Murong King, there was actually a man with an extraordinary temperament. It's Murong Qiu, Murong Qing's cousin. Murong Chamber of Commerce is a descendant of the ancestors. Xiu was reunited for the 9th awakening, and he went to the autumn hunting court with Feng Qingshu. Many people thought of a poor man who was vehemently rejected, and couldn't help but shake his head. Adults, keep your distance. What is Murong Qiu? If that person found out, I don't know what it would be like. That person was hit. I am afraid that this autumn exam will be abandoned again. The crowd saw Murong Qiu and Feng Qingshu set foot on the back mountain, and whispered. Yi Fuxian heard this from others shortly after, and some of them became the tragic actors of this dog blood story. Although he never thought of chasing after Feng Qingshu, he still had a little bit in his heart. Unhappy, nothing to do with love, just pure unhappy. Of course, he will not care too much. Next time, mainly used in spiritual practice, and strive for further strength when Qiu Yi arrives. A few days later, in the courtyard, Yi Fuxian practiced secretly, and the hot fire of the sun surrounded his body, fused Yi Fuxian's meridians. Now he has the soul of the sun and naturally practices the nature of fire. Before the ordeal in Haoshan, observing trees and trees can feel the rich aura of the properties of wood, while watching waterfalls and water can feel the aura of the nature of water, but they can't create a sun soul like watching the sun. Is he too greedy? After all, that kind of situation is something you can't find. With the sound of crippled footsteps, Yi Fuxian stopped practicing, looked at the rest of his life, and asked, what's wrong? Otherwise, the rest of his life would not bother him. Many people have descended from Haoshan in the past 2 days, and there is a rumor in the academy that they are full of joy a lifetime. What rumors? Yi Fuxian was curious. In the place where Qingzhou Zugong was cleaned, some people said that they saw the dragon. The rest of his eyes burned. Dragon. Yi Fuxian's eyes flashed a bright light. The forbidden land was prepared for hunting, and someone saw a dragon. Momo said that it was a forbidden place. Even if a dragon appeared in the entire Tianyao Mountain, it must be sensational news. If it is true, I am afraid that it will cause an earthquake in Qingzhou City. Dragons, symbols of good luck, are demonic sages, comparable to emperor sages. Do you think that is right or wrong? Yi Fuxian said all his life. Some people say they saw it with their own eyes. Today, Qingzhou Zugong is even preparing to clear the court and let the disciples return. If Zugong really did this, it is most likely true. Go and walk. Yi Fuxian stood up and walked towards another hospital. In recent days, many students have returned. Some people have not left like Yi Fuxian. Perhaps because they knew that the realm was too low and dangerous. No monster can handle it. When the two came to Haoshan, they found that many people descended from the mountain and formed groups, which was definitely not normal. Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life looked at each other. Someone looking up at the mountain asked, what happened? Evil monsters barged into the restricted area. The teachers let us down the mountain and don't leave again, someone responded. What harm the monster? The teacher can't kill directly. Someone said in surprise. It is said that it is a thunder python. It has been practiced for many years, and it is terrible. It has not been won for now. Everyone talks a lot. Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life looked at each other, and they felt that something was wrong. Is it a snake or a dragon? Chapter 7, Carved Division. On Laotian Road, some people continue to descend, some people are energetic, and some people are debilitating. Many people talk about the existence of the Python demon. Master Yun had reached a conclusion. One who witnessed it doubted whether he misread. After all, the Python monster that had been cultivated into essence was somewhat similar to a dragon. Yi Fuxian saw a familiar figure descending from the mountain. Fengqing Zuixu's red shirt was a little dusty, but the pretty face was still clean, radiant, and seemed to be in a good mood. He chatted with Murong Qiu beside him. Seeing Feng Qingshu and Murong Qiu coming down the mountain, several people subconsciously looked at Yi Fuxian, making Yi Fuxian very depressed. Wu Fengqingzu seemed to notice this scene and looked at Yi Fuxian, but her eyes immediately shifted, and she seemed to be deliberately avoiding looking at Yi Fuxian and stopped talking. Murong Qiu next to him seemed to have realized something. His eyes fell on the mountain road and fell on Yi Fuxian's body. The 17-year-old boy's handsome face showed a hint of arrogance, and his smiling eyes looked a little disdainful. Just glance. Yi Fuxian didn't pay much attention to it. He said all his life, if it really is a dragon, will Zugong deliberately hide it? I groaned for the rest of my life, then nodded, and said earnestly, yes. Let's go up the mountain before it's completely cleared. Yi Fuxian said, and as he walked, he ran towards the mountain road. Many people who had seen this scene were stunned. Feng Qingshu even stood there in a daze, looking at Yi Fuxian who was running towards her. Wouldn't she be stimulated? Squinting to see Yi Fuxian coming to his side, Feng Qingshu looked at him, his lips moved slightly, and he just wanted to say something, but he saw Yi Fuxian passing right beside him, obviously not going to him. Yu Yusheng's sharp eyes glanced at Feng Qingshu and Yu Rongqiu beside him, passing by. What are they doing? The people clearly realized that they had misunderstood. Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life went up the mountain at this time. Aren't you crazy? I didn't go before. Now there is a python monster. Everyone is going down the mountain. Instead, they are running up the mountain. Observing ideas can be beneficial for birds and animals. How about you watch a dragon? He did the same for the rest of his life, and wanted to see what the dragon looked like. The main road uphill was blocked, and there was a Qingzhou Academy guard there. Only downhill, not uphill. Fortunately, Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life were mentally prepared. He didn't lean back, but walked around the path from the path. All the way, levels are everywhere. The more curious the two people are, the stronger the guess in their hearts. In Laotian, in the forest, the two sneaked up quietly, asking for the rest of their lives. It is difficult to find this road. Which way should we go? Where there are most people in the blockade, which way to go? Yi Fuxian's eyes brightened, and the rest of his eyes brightened, and continued to sneak towards the most severe of the blockade. After a bit of time passed, the sun set and night fell, making it easier for both of them to move. There seems to be less and less people. We may have reached the core area. Just wait here and try your luck. Yi Fuxian leaned against a big tree and closed his eyes to rest, and the night grew darker. This area has a strange silence. As if there were no monsters in this generation. Suddenly, a flash of lightning struck the night sky, lighting up the dense forest like day. At this time, everyone in this area looked up and showed a serious meaning. Are you coming? Boom. Thunder came out, and lightning appeared one after another, more and more often. Yi Fuxian was a little excited and nervous when he saw this strange scene. Dragon, it really is a dragon. A voice called out. Yi Fuxian jumped from the ground, his gaze looked into the air not far away, where a dragon that was thousands of meters high was floating and dancing, suddenly disappeared and appeared in another recipe. The roar grew louder. This area became a world of thunder and lightning. Dragon. Staring at the air for the rest of his life, he couldn't use words to describe the shock in his heart at this moment. On top of the doll, there are strong figures, with bright light around their bodies, come to life, very strong, as proud as peerless strong. Above the void, a figure descended like lightning. This man was middle-aged and looked very handsome. When he appeared, many of the strong men were slightly in debt. It seemed that this man was very respected. It's not a dragon. The figure held his hands behind his back and looked up into the void. The first sentence made everyone tremble. This is the form of a dragon. The dragon rhyme is deliberately released and revealed here. The middle-aged eyes are very sharp, saying, this dragon form with the shape of a dragon must come from a true dragon. Who is the person who came to Tianya Mountain? No wonder it only reveals its form and rhyme without any destructive power. If it's a real dragon, I'm afraid we've been crushed. A strong man in the void said. Even if it is not a real dragon, there is a dragon form in my Qingzhou city. I don't know whether it is a blessing or a curse. The middle-aged eyes were divine, swept down, and saw that there were several young people in different directions. He couldn't help whispering, what a brave couple. Below, not only Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life came here secretly, but other people did not leave. The youth's heart is always full of curiosity, especially legendary things. This group of little kids. A strong man whispered next to him, all blocking this side, even these little people sneaked in. At this moment, Futian's heart was immovable. In his eyes, there was only a dragon above the void, or a dragon flying in the tail, or a dragon flying in the sky, and a dragon looking at the end without looking at the tail. Wu Dazhang watched the idea work, and there seemed to be endless thunder and lightning in the palace of his life, and a dragon shadow appeared. A terrifying rumbling aura merged into his body, all the lightning flashed through his body, his consciousness seemed to fall, and in his eyes, there was only the dragon. The scene before his eyes seemed to be etched into his mind. Suddenly a flash of lightning came and pierced his brows, and the image of a ruthless dragon was imprinted on his pupils. A terrifying thunder force was running over Futian's body, making his body have extreme strength and couldn't help but let out a low roar, but at this moment he didn't seem to be able to escape from this state. Come out, the dragon rhyme is even engraved in my head. The sacred dragon came to his tail, and he saw the majestic dragon rushing towards him. At this time, Futian's body trembled slightly, but he couldn't move an inch. Be careful, the rest of his life roared, but it was too late, and the terrifying dragon shadow rushed to Futian's eyebrows in a panic. Futian gave a loud roar, as if a real dragon was rushing over. Into his mind, with endless thunder. Boom! His head shook violently, and Futian's consciousness gradually disappeared. You've finally grown up. A voice sounded in Futian's mind, his body fell straight, and at the same time, the vision of this world disappeared. What happened? The strong men in the sky blinked, their eyes stared at Futian, and one person cursed, what just happened? This unlucky little man seems to have been attacked by Long Yun, someone said. This is too bold, let's see if something happens. He is fine. At this point, the handsome middle-aged came and spoke. Futian stared at him for the rest of his life, and saw that the middle-aged said, give him to me temporarily, and I will take him back to take a look. Okay. Everyone nodded, and the rest of his life looked at him, and said, Senior, can I go together? Rest assured, he will be fine, I will be in the palace. Middle-aged said the rest of his life, his eyes have a strange magic power, people want to believe it, and nodded for the rest of his life, senior trouble. Futian opened his eyes and felt a slight pain in his body. The consciousness entered the palace of life, and of course, above the ancient trees of the world, there was a region of thunder and lightning, and a dragon hovering there was very majestic. Suddenly, I entered the palace of life. Futian's heart trembled. After passing out, he seemed to hear something and couldn't remember it. Since the beginning of the practice, he fainted twice. Futian thought that he couldn't help but smile. This is really shit. Of course, if he could get 2 harvests every time he was unconscious, he wouldn't mind going back a few times. I feel like something. Futian fiercely sat down and found that the clothes on his body were not his, and here, obviously, it was not another courtyard where he lived. Standing up, Futian pushed open the door of the room and went out. I saw here is a very clean and elegant courtyard. There is a pavilion in front where there is a young girl sitting quietly well. It looks like a painting. Next to him, there was a middle-aged and elegant tasting tea. This image looks very peaceful. Walking gently into the pavilion, his eyes fell on the place where the girl was painting, which was a special piece of paper, and the girl did not paint, but constantly drew some magical lines, with a touch of aura. Seep. Here, Fa. Futian was a little surprised, the girl in front of him, how could he carve Fa Lu? So, isn't he a sculptor? Isn't that too evil? Did you see it? The handsome middle-aged put down his teacup and looked at Futian. No, but I've seen it in books. Futian said, this blanket is engraved with a shield, and painted with a metallic aura, it must be a defensive spell. Can you see? The middle-aged were a little surprised. Futian nodded, and Dazuanzi thought that it was very sensitive to aura. Want to learn? The middle-aged asked with a smile. Think. Futian nodded, bowed and saluted the middle-aged man, and said, disciple meets teacher. Don't move too fast. Of course Futian knows the weight of the engraving, and he has a job that is rarer and rarer than a mage. He has a very high status. An engraver must also be a talented magician. You are as shameless as rumored. The girl put down her pen and looked at Futian. Futian smiled indifferently, looked at the girl's dazzling face, and said, Fairy, we have met again. Chapter 8, Interesting. The girl before his eyes was the legendary girl Qingzhou Zugong. He is legendary. In addition to his appearance, he also has the first literary examination every spring and autumn, and he has entered the palace since the first year. Fairy. The middle-aged man next to him looked at Futian doubtfully, and Hua Jiu glanced at Futian. Teacher, very beautiful, if the devil, Futian explained with a smile. The relationship between the middle-aged and Hua Ziyu is definitely not ordinary, and of course, they have to say good things. Good teeth. T smiled middle-aged, looked at Futian said, teaching and preaching can be called a teacher. If you want to learn something in the future, you can come to me and call me a teacher. Ji Hua Jiu Maimo looked at her father, who had not accepted a disciple for many years. Today, he made an exception for Yi Futian. Is he so optimistic about his talent? Disciple Yi Futian met the teacher. Yi Futian saluted again. Wu Zhongnian nodded and said, I always didn't pay attention to this red tape. The autumn exams are about to start. Go back and prepare for it. Today is Kiwai. Yi Futian froze and slept for so long. Dong. Underscore as if responding to his words, Qingzhou Zugong's bell rang, resounding through the heavens and the earth. Yi Futian looked up and looked into the distance. Finally, did it start? Xu, you sent Futian. The middle-aged said. Hua Xu glanced at Yi Futian, and saw Yi Futian's face was a little proud. Let's go. Hua Jiu turned around and walked out. I haven't changed my clothes yet. Yi Futian said, the dress should belong to the teacher. Go back and change your own clothes. Hua Jiu's voice was cold, and Yi Futian chased after him, saying, should I call your sister? Impossible. I will continue to summon the elf. Yi Futian shrugged nonchalantly. Fairy, what are you doing now? Ji Hua Jiu was ignored. Heard that you are a destiny mage, really? Yi Futian asked again, still no answer. Have you ever been in love? Yi Futian said again, if you don't answer me, you will default. Not. Hua Jiu bit her lip, looking at Yi Futian. I don't have it, fate. Yi Futian looked at Hua Jiu with an angry expression, but smiled brightly. Xu stopped. Yi Futian looked back at him, and the morning sun shone on the girl's beautiful face. The shallow smile surprised that time. You really are shameless, Hua said, then turned around. Yi Futian looked at the back of Hua Jiu. A bright arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. Ah. Today's Qingzhou Zugong is more lively than usual. Outside the Zugong gate, people continue to gather. Qingzhou Academy every autumn of every year, many great figures from Qingzhou City will come, as well as student elders. They are all qualified to attend the ceremony. Those who can't enter will also be waiting outside, and want to know what extraordinary names will appear in the exams this fall. Although the autumn exams only a group of small children took part in, the eldest was only 18 years old. However, many of the young people who had performed well in the autumn examinations would become big figures in Qingzhou City. There is no doubt that those who come to Qingzhou City are famous. People, like many students, took the autumn examinations of Qingzhou Academy here. Therefore, it would not be an exaggeration to say that it attracted the attention of the city. The legendary girl of the Qingzhou Huajiayu Learning Academy has become the first in the 3 years of literacy exams, and she has a very good talent for practicing. I don't know what an outstanding performance this time was. Yang Ziyu is second in the 3-year literary exam. I don't know if I can shake Huaji's status. Murong Kiyu Chamber of Commerce has awakened the ninth to return to the kingdom, has long been able to become a formal disciple, and it is rumored that he is slow to join because he wants to win undeniably Kiwai first, but this time, it should be one last resort. Don't forget the rest of Yefu's son who is in charge for the rest of his life. He should not be underestimated. If it is because of the Yi family, I am afraid that in this spring, he has become an official disciple of Zugong. He is only 15 years old. People outside talk a lot, but they are very familiar with the disciples outside Qingzhou Academy. For example, the influence of Qingzhou Academy in Qingzhou City is obvious. Yi Futian returned to another hospital, and the rest of his life saw him return safely, and looked at him and said, are you okay? Not only is it okay, but Yi Futian smiled, and the whole body lightning shone, making a crackling sound, and the lightning walked around the whole body as he wanted. Sixth awakening, there is no two realms. Looking at Yi Futian for the rest of his life, not only did he get the power of thunder, but he managed to break through. Could it be that the dragon rhyme is in the body, but it is full of Yi Futian? You can practice simple spells now, said the rest of his life. No time, let's join Kiyu first. Yi Futian said. Well, Uncle Yi heard that you are going to take the autumn exam. This time you will come to witness the ceremony. Father will come. Yi Futian's eyes lit up, and then he smiled and nodded. Okay, this time, surprised my father. Yi Futian changed his clothes, and then they left another courtyard and walked towards Yanwichang. Currently, there are 3,000 cases in the field of performing martial arts, neatly arranged, and the scenery is spectacular. Right in front of him, on the stairs, many palace disciples and teachers from the Qingzhou Palace appeared. On the side of the stands, there are no seats. The great figures of Qingzhou City and the parents of several students have arrived in advance. Fu Yetian's arrival attracted the attention of many people, and many people looked at him with strange looks. A few days ago, Yi Futian was rejected for chasing after Feng Qingshu. Feng Qingshu and Murong Qiu tried on the same day. Yi Futian was pushed up the mountain and was injured by the python demon attack. Legends have become even more legendary now. However, this person's life was so hard that he was attacked by the python demon and was still intact. After you were attacked that day, Qingzhou Zugong claimed to have been attacked by a vicious python. The rest of his life, said in Yi Fuxian's ear. Yi Fuxian nodded to show that he knew. A smile appeared. Yi Fuxian walked towards the pulpit. Somewhere towards the stand, a group of people were sitting together. Yi Beiquan was chatting with a middle-aged person not far from him. When he saw Yi Fuxian coming, he couldn't help exclaiming, "I heard that you are going to take the autumn exam. I personally came to observe the ceremony. If I make Laozi too embarrassing, don't say that you are my son Yi Beiquan in the future." Front. Yi Fuxian had a black line on his face, looked at the rough middle-aged man, and said, "Can you give me some face? You know how to save face." Yi Beiquan opened his eyes and looked at his son. "How thick is this man, but he is a father. The door is a pity." Yi Fuxian said, holding his forehead, depressed. "Don't pretend, son. Did you offend my daughter-in-law?" Yi Beiquan looked at Yi Fuxian. Yi Fuxian froze, looking at the middle-aged man not far away, inside him. Moreover, Feng Qingshu sat quietly without looking here. "Yi Beiquan, when have I promised you, and less for my relationship?" Feng Ruhai faced Yi Beiquan Road. "Uncle Feng." Yi Fuxian rubbed his brows, feeling a bit messy. "Fuxian, how was your training? Have you grown up?" Feng Ruhai asked. "Well, of course, I have made some progress, otherwise I will not participate in this autumn festival." Yi Fuxian nodded slightly. "It's good to have progress. Young people should train hard and not think like your father thought." Feng Ruhai looked at Yi Beiquan. "I understand." Yi Fuxian nodded with a smile. "All my life, this time, I was looking forward to your performance." Feng Ruhai looked at the rest of his life again. The rest of his life was rather cold. "Well, all of you get ready to get ready." Feng Ruhai said casually. Several people nodded. Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life turned away, and then Feng Qingshu went down in another direction. What happened to these little people? Is there a contradiction? Yi Beiquan frowned. Yi Fuxian and Feng Qingshu were both about to rise. This time, it was abnormal, without saying a word. Many people around were standing casually chatting, even though it was only a literary test today. The guests who came were still very interested. For practitioners in the early stages, important performance and knowledge talent are on par with each other. People often have the opportunity to win over the weak. Qingzhou Zugong students entered the venue one after another, choosing their own position, which was quite spectacular. Yi Fuxian and the rest of his life also entered the place. They chose a place to sit side by side. Looking at the students who continued to enter, Yi Fuxian took a deep breath. This is the first time he has taken the autumn exam since he entered the palace, mind a little up and down. Hua Ji. At this time, a young girl walked into the stadium and instantly attracted countless lights. The girl is easy to wear, but still noble, and nothing can cover it. It is beautiful, the students from Qingzhou Academy praised. The face of 15 years is very evil, and in 3 years, it will bring disaster to the country. Several people in the stands were amazed. What was even more terrifying was that this young girl was extremely talented. Some big people even know that the young girl's life is also extraordinary. It is said that Murong Qiu's child failed. On the pulpit, a grand figure of the Murong Chamber of Commerce looked at the dazzling young girl in a low voice and looked a little disappointed. Usually, with his talent, the comrades of Qingzhou City are afraid that there is nothing he can take care of. Murong Qiu should have officially entered the palace last year, and has delayed a lot of time. Someone responded. The big man nodded. That's really evil. Yi Fuxian also saw Hua Jiu, and when he entered the venue, it attracted a lot of attention. Apart from him, no second person can do it. Hua Jiu stopped at that place, and seemed to be looking for a place. After a while, he lifted his leg and walked in a certain direction. Many of the students sitting down were a little nervous when they saw Hua Jiu pass by, and eagerly looked ahead at the flowers. Xiu could sit beside himself, however, this was just a thought. Finally, Waji's footsteps stopped, and the eyes of the people also stopped. In the next moment, the dazzling girl who attracted countless eyes slowly sat down. Many people looked at Hua Jiu next to him, and scolded the very lucky person. When the crowd saw the person next to Hua Jiu, time seemed to stop, countless people's facial expressions froze, and their moods were blown away. Untidy Chapter 9, Text Test. Sitting beside him, Xie Hua Jiu turned out to be Yi Fuxian, a legend, who abandoned the exam for 3 consecutive years, chased after Feng Qingshu and was rejected, and was about to be expelled from Qingzhou Academy. This bastard man. Many people cursed their hearts. This man took the autumn exam for the first time in 3 years and sat next to Wajiayu. Moreover, Hua Jiu sat on the side, which meant that only one person could sit next to her. Such treatment fell on Yi Fuxian, and everyone's mood could be imagined. I felt a pair of evil eyes. Yi Fuxian glanced at the girl next to him, and saw that she was sitting quietly in her position, graceful and natural, looking straight ahead, as if she didn't know her at all. This fairy is clearly intentional. Yi Fuxian said in a depressed tone, but he wanted to make a tacit reference, but he didn't expect it to be noticed in other ways. There are people who come to this side, and the front and back positions immediately become the most sought-after seats. When they pass, they will look at Yi Futian fiercely. At this time, a handsome teenager came to Yi Futian and looked at Yi Futian. Can you change positions? Yi Futian looked up. The boy in front of him was about the same age, and King Shu's face was slightly proud, with a very natural tone. This is Yang Ziyu. The attention of many people is still here. Yang Ziyu was second in the 3-year literary examination and had always wanted to surpass Hua Ziyu. Many people know that Yang Ziyu is secretly in love with Hua Ziyu. Besides, Yang Ziyu wasn't just a literary exam. He is now awakened to the 7th level of awakening. He is a fire and aura genius. He is a true genius and one of the most charming outsider characters. Just a little less fluent. Yi Futian looked at Yang Ziyu. It was really disrespectful. Of course. Yi Futian said. The people next to him were suffocating, boneless. Not. 3 more words fell, and the smile that had just appeared on Yang Shu's face froze there. He saw the smile on Yi Futian's face, as if he was deliberately mocking him. I know you, who left the exam for 3 years and will soon be expelled from Qingzhou Academy. Why are you still wasting time here like you are? Yang Ziyu was not angry, but only sarcastic. I am happy. Yi Futian was still smiling. In that case, I have to hope that you won't be embarrassed after the essay test is over. Yang Shudan smiled. Of course, you don't have to lose face. After the irony, Yang Ziyu didn't look at Yi Futian again, but looked at Hua Jiu next to him, then sat down seriously, as if he was about to enter the battlefield, and waited. This is a sad story. Yi Futian looked behind Yang Ziyu, who was sitting in sympathy. Yi Futian's refusal did not surprise anyone. This was his character, the arrogant legendary waste material. Of course, after the autumn festival ended, the legend would finally end and he would be expelled from Qingzhou Academy. As the students entered the place one after another, the formal disciples began to circle the martial arts field. In 3,000 cases, more than 1,000 people entered the entrance examination for the autumn festival. After all, there are many students who have just entered the school for a year. They are not very confident. They know that it is difficult to get good grades. Instead of being recorded by the school, it's better to keep a clean suitcase. It is normal to leave the exam. Of course, like Yi Futian who left the exam for 3 years in a row, it was just a legend. There were many formal disciples in front of the Wu Yanwu Stadium. Keen Yimai's eyes stared at Yi Futian. For 3 years, he finally appeared in the spring and autumn examination room. Finally, he didn't leave all the exams in 3 years. Yang Ziyu has promised the Magic Palace. After QI ends, he will directly go to the Magic Palace to practice. Then he will become a formal disciple, a waste of gas. I don't know where the energy and Yang Xia confronted. Mo Lanshan station beside Qin Yi, smiled lightly. Wu Qinyi frowned. Although Yi Futian is really bad, the word trash is still a bit harsh. He looked at Mo Lanshan and said, do you have any prejudice against him? Of course. Mo Lanshan nodded secretly. How dare you dare to treat you like that in the lecture hall? I don't understand. For such a person, why would you wish on him and waste time on him? Wu Qinyi didn't know how to refute it, and for that reason, it was probably because his aptitude test 3 years ago was so amazing that he shouldn't fall for it. It's about time, let's hand out the exam papers. An old man sitting at the back said lightly, and suddenly many formal students stepped forward to collect exam papers and walked towards the students. This means that the autumn exams of the grand exams have officially begun. The Yan Nuo Martial Arts Stadium was quiet, and the people who came to witness the ceremony were the big people in Qingzhou City and the student elders, so they would naturally follow orders consciously. The students got the exam papers one after another. Feng Qingshu took a deep breath. This fall, he hopes to get a good ranking and get the reward of free access to the 2nd floor of the Qingzhou Zugong Library. In this way, he can advance. See that extraordinary and powerful spell. Before smiling, Ling Xiao glanced at Yi Futian. After seeing the face of the legendary girl next to him, he had an invisible jealousy on his face, and he was secretly in love with Feng Qingsno. For Wajiayu, it was a dream deep in his heart. Yi, why is he sitting beside Wajiayu? After getting the test paper, Wajiayu was very quiet and probably confident. Yang Shu's fist clenched slightly, and then he let go, very seriously. As for Yi Futian, he glanced at the exam paper with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth, then he took the pen. His first fall exams have finally come. He knew that many people were waiting to see his jokes and looking forward to his existence. Expelled from school, unfortunately, they are doomed to disappointment. The exam questions range from easy to difficult. The previous questions are basic practice questions, and most students can answer them. Yefu has a beautiful world, and solves problems quickly. Interesting. Yi Futian's eyes fell on the exam questions. During the battle between a warrior and a mage, the attribute aura in the mage's body was nearly exhausted. What would you do if you were a warrior? And what would you do if you were a magician? Yi Shadian's voice came out, and Yi Futian quickly wrote his own answer. After a bit of time passed, several students had sweat on their foreheads. On the back of the exam paper, the exam questions become more open, but also more difficult. Unknowingly, Yi Fuxian's eyes have come to the final exam question, which seems to be very simple. Title: Under the same number of worlds, a group of martial arts practitioners and magic practitioners fight. Who can win? This last question is like sending points and group battles, which means that martial arts practitioners have various professions, so wizards naturally have all kinds of magicians. The power of witches is amazing, and groups are destroyed directly under the attack of spells. Yi Fuxian thought about it, then smiled, filled in his own answer, and then put down his pen. Next to me, Hua Ziyu lowered his pen almost simultaneously, which seemed very easy. The two turned to look at each other subconsciously. Yi Fuxian had a provocative smile on his face, and Hua Jiu glared at him, but it was still pleasing to the eye. Of course, other people could not see this small action. Someone noticed Hua Ji in front of Yanwu Stadium. Of course, as usual, it was the first to stop writing. One of the elders in the palace smiled, and even if he sat quietly to answer the question, it would still be the focus. No, the teenagers around him are a little earlier than him, but I'm afraid no one will answer. The old man next to him smiled and shook his head. The girl with the flower interpretation sits next to him. I'm afraid it will be difficult to concentrate. Stop writing so fast. You tried so hard to get a little chance for him, but in the fall exams, he was thinking about how to get the girl's attention. Mo Lanshan said to Qin Yi next to him, pressing his voice down very low. Qin Yimei looked at Yi Fuxian. His heart was a little disappointed. Gradually, more and more people put down their pens. Some people were happy and some were lost. Finally, accompanied by the old man standing in front of the stage, it meant that the autumn quiz exam was over. Many academic students were already waiting. When the old man stood up, he walked towards the students and collected the exam papers. The exam papers were taken, but the students did not leave. The Qingzhou Zugong autumn examination will be reviewed on the spot and the results will be announced, which is very efficient. Dozens of elders and lecturers in Zugong school reviewed at the same time. You can imagine how fast the speed was. At the time of their review, many of the disciples below were a little nervous, and the people on the stands they chatted and waited for the results. When the current lecturer started classifying the exam papers and taking notes, a tense atmosphere also spread. After a long time, a lecturer walked forward holding the list and looked at the students. Everyone knew that the first list to be announced was the list of those who passed the fall writing exam. Li Yu, Fang Yun, Mo Hanjiang. Every time the lecturer said the name, one of the trainees showed ease, and naturally, some people were disappointed because they wanted a better rank. In addition to the first list of qualified candidates, the top 3, top 2, and top 1 lists will be announced successively. 22 is 72, 2 is 36, and 1 is just 3. Qi Qinyi had listened carefully. When the rankings were announced, she was more disappointed and failed the essay exam. Then she was expelled from school. His gaze looked at Yi Fuxian in the crowd and sighed silently. In front of Yi Fuxian, Yang Ziyu smiled coldly. Of course, since it will be expelled from the college horizontally and vertically, why bother to lose face again? Wu Fengqingzu also glanced at Yi Fuxian. Mei Mei was a little disappointed, but then returned as usual. Wasn't this the expected ending? Yi Fuxian, do you remember your arrogance in the academy last time? Now that you have finally dropped out of the academy, the insinuation is not ironic. Ling Xiao even mocked in the air, making many people look at Yi Fuxian. Secretly, this shameless man will finally be removed from Qingzhou Zugong. Chapter 10, One Blockbuster. Yi Fuxian looked up and looked at Ling Xiao's slightly ironic face, but his face remained calm. This list is only a list of qualified people. What are you excited about? Yi Fuxian said lightly, glancing at the arrogant crowd around him. Ha ha. Ling laughed and looked at Yi Fuxian. Do you still think that you can be included in the first-class list? After 3 years of dreaming, you are still so arrogant that you are here. At that time, he did not give up and fought. You laugh so boldly. If the result is not the same as you think, won't it look ugly at that time? Yi Fuxian frowned. Even though he knew that Ling Xiao had always hated himself, he shouldn't be so excited. What hate? I can't see the coffin without tears, so just wait. Ling smiled coldly and Yi Fuxian shook his head. The lecturer at the front was still busy arranging the exam papers and transcripts. After a while, Qin Yi came forward with the list of papers, and announced that there were 72 students in the top 3. Among them, there is a Ling smile. The name was in it, and his eyes turned to Yi Fuxian's eyes became more and more arrogant, but he did not say irony. Because he had to wait for the list to come out, and then humiliate him hard. Feng Qingshu was a little excited. The top 3 list did not have his name, and he was confident that he would not fail. Then, his name tends to be in the top 2 lists. For example, if he achieves a good performance after the exam, his goal can be achieved. Feng Qingshu. The second list of names began to be announced. The first name is Feng Qingshu. Her beautiful eyes flashed a flash of color, and then a smile appeared on her face. Sure enough, he made it to the second roster. All my life, the lecturer kept announcing that every name shouted had fame among the disciples outside Qingzhou Academy. Murong Qiu. When his last name fell, the lecturer put down the list in his hand. Murong Qiu, who was sitting in a stance, turned pale instantly and looked extremely unsightly. 26 were in the top 2 list, which might be a very high honor for others. However, to him, if he did not make it to the top 2 lists, he was considered a failure. Last time, he was the third in the first place. This time, he was also going to challenge the arrogant girl, but apparently, he failed again, and this time he lost even worse. In the stands, the face of the Murong Chamber of Commerce is also a little unsightly. Murong Qiu is only second, not even ranked. The Whispering Head, only one person and 3 people. There is a certain rank, others have no rank. The others were also confused. There's been a lot of discussion. There are 3 places in the first place. The legendary girl and Yang Ziyu should still be the top 2. Then who squeezed Murong Qiu into the second place list? It seemed that the students who were more famous from the outside were all on the second place list. They really couldn't think of anyone who had been left behind. Who is it this time? Blockbuster. Looking around the crowd, everyone wanted to see who seemed to be missing, but either way, it was unexpected. However, this had nothing to do with Ling Xiao. He glanced cynically at Yi Futian. Now that everything was settled, the man sat there with a calm face. In front, several elders from Qingzhou Zugong were holding the final 3-point paper. There seems to be some disagreement on what is being discussed, such as discussing the final result. Yang Ziyu took a deep breath after seeing this scene. This time, he is at beyond the interpretation of flowers. He has promised the Magic Palace, and will directly go to the Magic Palace next year to practice. This is the last time he will participate in Kiwai, which means that this is the only chance to surpass Wajiayu. Finally, some teachers in Qingzhou Academy seem to have made a decision. Someone recorded it next. A teacher stepped forward and looked around at the students present. For a moment, the entire room was silent, waiting to announce the final answer. 1 in the third, Yang Ziyu. The teacher said the first name, calmed the space for a moment, and a loud noise broke out in an instant. Yang Ziyu. Is Yang Ziyu the third? I have always lost to Yang Ziyu, Wajiayu's genius character. This time, I was blackmailed like Murong Qiu. This is not possible. Yang Ziyu, who was anxiously waiting for the result, suffered a huge blow, and seemed to be distracted, saying to himself, this is impossible, it is impossible. He had thought of surpassing Wajiayu, but this time, instead of surpassing, he was blackmailed by people and it was difficult to accept it for a while. Who is that? People became more curious, even the people around the booth stared intently, staring at the teachers who announced the first list. Second seat, flower interpretation. The teacher spoke again, like a thunder, banging everyone's heart. Hua Xeu. Hua Xeu first in the autumn essay test for 3 years in a row, this time, second place. Moreover, neither Yang Ziyu nor Mu Rongqiu defeated him. Until now, no one could guess who the mysterious man was. Zunhua Jiyu herself was a little surprised. For some reason, her beautiful eyes stared at Yi Futian beside her, and she seemed to have a strange look, didn't she? Everyone's curiosity is now extreme. Who is it? Okay. A low roar came out, and the rest of his life clenched his fists, showing an excited expression. No one knows why he is like that, nor does he understand what he likes. Only he knows, because only he believes and understands people. The elders of Zuixu Palace looked at the people again, and the eyes passed through the crowd and fell on a young man, with shock and shock. Sleeping in the palace for 3 years, is it surprising? Qingzhou Zugong Qiu Wenshu's first test of the first place. The old man's voice paused, and slowly spat out a name. Yu. Fu. God. With his voice falling, the noisy space was silent for a moment, a deathly silence. The expressions on the faces of the students are extraordinary. They want to see everyone possible, but only Yi Futian will not appear in their imagination. For someone who had abandoned the test for 3 consecutive years and had not advanced for 3 years, and had been stuck in a gathering state, the first test of Qiu Yi's literary test. Are you kidding? Of course, the elders of Qingzhou Zugong naturally can't make jokes in the autumn exam. After being shocked, an even bigger outbreak occurred. Yi Futian, the top. I must be dreaming. Some people think they heard wrong. Yi Futian. Qin Yi is not far from an elder. He repeated the sentence in a low voice, slightly absent-minded. His name does not appear on the list of eligible persons. On the first list, but this is too dramatic, right? I thought Yi Futian would be expelled from Qingzhou Academy. He would humiliate Yi Xiao, Ling Xiao with a gloat. The smile on his face had already hardened there. He stood and stared ahead. Yi Futian is at the top of the list. First test. Wu Fengqingzu opened her mouth. Meizu looked at the elder who announced the first list, then slowly averted her eyes and looked at the young man. At this time, Yi Futian was still sitting there quietly, with a shallow and unwavering smile on his face as usual, as if it was light and light, as if all this seemed to him, no one was excited and surprised. It's like, what should it be? How strong is self-confidence? I haven't heard for 3 years. Is it just because of the blockbuster? Hua Ziyu's beautiful eyes, who sat next to Yi Fuxian, looked at the teenager next to him. The first record in the 3-year literary test was broken, but his eyes didn't lose too much. Unlike Yang Ziyu and Yu Rongchu's face was very gloomy, on the contrary, he didn't seem to care much. Some of her beautiful eyes were just a little curious and unpredictable. The father told him that Yi Fuxian's talent was not inferior to him. He was naturally a little unsure. Today's autumn test, he also wants to see why Yi Fuxian can give his father such a high view and is willing to accept it. As a student. In the essay test, Yi Fuxian gave him a surprise. It must be wrong, this can't be. Suddenly, a scream came out, and many people saw the figure in front of Yi Fuxian, Yang Ziyu. He just emerged from the loss, squeezed into the 3rd place in the first place list, but what awaited him was a more severe blow. The person who blackmailed him and took the first test was not long before. A man who was very ironic in the past, so what were his words just now? Aren't you hitting yourself? Yang Ziyu, what is your question? The elder who announced the list asked him. Yang Ziyu looked and glanced at Yi Fuxian coldly. He is sitting next to Hua Jiyu. Plagiarizing, he must have copied Hua Jiyu's exam paper. Yes, he must be a plagiarism. Ling Xiao also seems to have caught something, echoing, the eyes of many people are sparkling, as if they have found a breakthrough. Do you think that all of us who check the exam papers are blind? The elder's cold words spilled everyone's illusions. Yes, their examination papers did not only pass through the hands of one person, especially one examination paper of these 3 people was the result of discussion and had gone through several reviews. If Yi Fuxian plagiarized Hua Jiyu, can he go unnoticed? Yi Fuxian's fingers slammed the case lightly, and it was always so easy and natural. All doubts will be crushed in the face of iron facts. I naturally believe in the ability of reviewing teachers. However, people always have their own preferences. I still don't accept it. I wonder why I ranked 3rd, but Yi Fuxian is at the top of the list. Yang Ziyu was like, after being so stimulated, he still insisted, as if he had to crush Yi Fuxian's top spot. Elder looked a little disappointed at Yang Ziyu. Was it so hard for him to accept failure? If you don't have this ability, even if you are talented, your future height is still limited. Yi Fuxian saw the figure in front of him. He was really bound, but the more Yang Ziyu insisted, the worse he would fall.